Walk into any dispensary and you will see flowers sorted onto shelves, with the price climbing as you move up. Somewhere near the top, there will be a tier called top shelf, or premium, or exotic. Here is the part nobody says out loud at the counter. There is no authority anywhere that defines those words. No agency inspects that flower and assigns it a grade. No standard exists that a jar has to meet before someone prints premium on the label. The word is chosen by whoever is selling it. That is the whole foundation, and everything else in this video is built on it. If you have spent years assuming the tier system reflects some external measurement, the way grades on beef or eggs or olive oil do, it does not. Nothing is being certified. I am Otis, and I have spent enough time on the supply side of this industry to have watched flour get sorted onto those shelves. And the sorting is not what most buyers imagine. Start with the tiers themselves, because the structure is doing work before you have looked at a single jar. Retail pricing tiers are a very old technique, and they are not unique to this industry. When a shop presents 3 options at 3 prices, the top option is frequently not there to be bought. It is there to make the middle option feel sensible. A customer who walks in with no reference point and sees an expensive tier at the top decides the mid-tier is reasonable by comparison, when in isolation, that same mid-tier price might have looked steep. The premium tier is doing a job even when nobody buys it. Now add the fact that the labels are self-assigned, and you have a system where a seller can decide how much of their harvest to call premium based on how much premium-priced inventory they want to move that month. The flour did not change. The shelf it sits on did. Which brings me to the thing that most surprises people when they hear it, and it is the single most useful fact in this video. A very large share of what gets sold as top shelf and what gets sold as mids comes off the same plants, in the same room, from the same harvest. A cannabis plant does not produce uniform flower. The colas at the top, sitting directly under the light, grow dense and large. Further down, where light penetration drops off, the same plant produces smaller, looser, wispier flower. Growers call it larf or popcorn. It has the same genetics, the same nutrients, the same water, the same cure, and broadly the same chemistry as the material at the top of the plant. What it does not have is density and size. So at harvest, that plant gets separated. The top material goes to the premium jars. The lower material goes into the value tier, or into pre-rolls, or off to extraction. One plant, 2 or 3 price points, and the difference the customer is paying for is largely where on the stem the flower happened to grow. I am not saying density is meaningless. Denser flower is often the result of better light and better environment, and there are genuine quality differences between one grower's top colas and another's. But within a single harvest, the gap between the shelf and the bargain bin is a great deal smaller than the gap between the prices. There is a related problem with the name on the jar, and it undermines the premium tier just as badly. Strain names are not registered, protected, or verified by anyone. There is no body confirming that the plant in front of you is what the label says. Genetic analyses comparing samples sold under identical strain names from different producers have repeatedly found that they are not the same plant, and that plants sold under different names are sometimes genetically near identical. A cutting gets passed around, renamed by whoever is growing it, crossed with something else, and sold under a name that carries a reputation it did not earn. So when a jar on the top shelf carries a famous name and a price to match, the name is doing a great deal of work and guaranteeing nothing. You are paying a premium for a word, and the word has no custodian. Now to the number on the label, because this is where it stops being clever marketing and starts being something closer to fraud. In most markets, price tracks the tested THC percentage more tightly than it tracks anything else. Bud tenders are asked for the strongest thing in the case constantly. Before we continue, everything I know about growing, 25 years of it, is written down in one place. Every method, every amount, every mistake I made so you would not have to. and a fair number of things nobody puts on the internet. The link is in the description. All right, let's dive back in. 5. Flour testing above a certain threshold commands a premium, and flour below it becomes difficult to sell at all. That creates an enormous financial incentive to produce a high number, and there are several ways to produce one that have nothing to do with growing better cannabis. The first is sample selection. A producer is generally the one who chooses which material goes to the lab. Send the very best top colas from the best plants in the room, and the certificate that comes back represents those buds, not the thousands of grams that will be packaged under the same number. There are also cruder versions of this, including dusting a sample with keef before it is submitted. The second, and the better documented one, is lab shopping. Testing laboratories compete for the business of producers, and producers take their business to labs that return favorable results. Independent investigations in several regulated markets have compared label claims against retests and found systematic inflation, frequently in the range of several percentage points, sometimes far more. Regulators in multiple states have suspended or disciplined laboratories over it. There has been litigation. This is not a rumor circulating among growers. It is a recognized structural problem in legal cannabis, and it exists because the entity being tested is the entity paying for the test. The third route is simpler still, and it is the one that requires no cooperation from a laboratory at all. Testing is done on a sample, and the results are applied to a batch. How large that batch is, and how consistent the material inside it is, varies enormously. A number generated from a small quantity of excellent flour can end up printed on packaging, covering a very large quantity of ordinary flour, entirely within the rules, so the number is unreliable. Here is the part that makes the whole arrangement absurd rather than merely dishonest. The number was never a good predictor of your experience in the first place. Research at the University of Colorado looked at regular cannabis users consuming products of substantially different potencies and measured intoxication and impairment. The users of high-potency products showed higher THC levels in their blood, as you would expect. But the difference in how intoxicated they actually were did not track that gap the way anyone assumed it would. Tolerance, individual physiology, and how the plant's other compounds interact all intervene between the percentage on the jar and what happens to you. Terpenes are a large part of that. They are the aromatic compounds that give a cultivar its smell, and they influence the character of the effect, not just the flavor. Minor cannabinoids contribute as well. None of this appears in the single headline percentage that the price is built on. So the industry has organized its pricing around a metric that is both widely inflated and weakly connected to what the customer is actually buying. Which leaves the last pillar of the top shelf tier, which is how the flour looks. This one is real, in that appearance genuinely varies. The trouble is that appearance can be improved by things that make the product worse. Dense, tight, chunky buds are partly a matter of genetics and partly environment. Some cultivars simply grow that way. A very frosty appearance is trichome coverage, which is a real indicator of resin production, though it is also strongly genetic and easy to overstate at a glance. Purple and dark coloring is the clearest case of appearance disconnecting from quality. Those colors come from anthocyanin pigments, which some cultivars express when exposed to cool temperatures, particularly cool nights in late flower. It is a pigment response. It tells you about genetics and temperature. It tells you nothing whatsoever about potency, and it commands a price premium anyway. Trim quality is another. Beautifully manicured, perfectly rounded buds look premium, and machine trimming can produce that look on material that would otherwise be sold as mids. Aggressive machine trimming also knocks trichomes off and damages the outer surface of the flour, so the better-looking product can be the more damaged one. And the most important one, which almost never gets discussed. A fast dry produces flour that looks excellent. Drying cannabis quickly in warm, dry conditions over 2 or 3 days locks in bright green color and gives you firm, attractive buds. It also drives off the volatile terpenes that carry all of the aroma and much of the character, and it leaves behind chlorophyll and other compounds that a slow, dry, and a proper cure would have broken down. The result looks like top shelf, smells like almost nothing, and is harsh to smoke. A slow dry, over 10 to 14 days at cool temperatures and moderate humidity, followed by weeks of curing in sealed containers, produces flour that may look slightly duller and is dramatically better in every way that matters. So visual grading actively rewards the wrong process. The grower who rushes the dry to get product on shelves faster gets brighter, more attractive flour, and beats the grower who took 3 extra weeks doing it properly. Given all of that, what should you actually be looking at? Smell first, always. If you can get your nose near it, do. Strong, complex, distinctive aroma means terpenes survived, which means the flour was dried and cured with some care. Flour that smells faintly of hay, or of nothing at all, was rushed or is old, regardless of what the shelf says, and regardless of the percentage on the label. This one indicator tells you more than every other signal combined. Harvest date second. Cannabis degrades. Terpenes evaporate over time, and THC slowly converts to CBN, which produces a duller, heavier effect. A packaging date is not a harvest date, and the two can be many months apart, so ask specifically when it was harvested. Flour that has been sitting for a year is not premium at any price. Reputable operations will tell you. Moisture content. Third, properly cured flour has a slight give when squeezed and springs back. Bud that crumbles to dust is over-dried and has lost its terpenes. Bud that feels damp or spongy was packaged too wet and carries a real risk of mold. Trichome appearance fourth, if you can see it closely. You are looking for intact, mostly cloudy resin heads sitting on their stalks rather than a surface of broken stems, which indicates rough handling or over-trimming. There is one practical consequence of everything I have just described that is worth acting on immediately, and it is the closest thing to free money in a dispensary. Look for the smalls. Most shops sell a value category of small buds, sometimes labeled smalls or popcorn, at a substantial discount. As I said earlier, a great deal of that material came off the same plants as the premium jars and went through the same dry and the same cure. It is smaller. That is very often the entire difference. If it smells strong and the harvest date is recent, you are buying the same harvest at a fraction of the price, and the only thing you have given up is the appearance of the bud in the jar. The exception to watch for is that some shops use the value tier as a place to move genuinely old inventory, which is exactly why the harvest date question matters more there than anywhere else in the shop. And while we are clearing things up, the belief that white ash indicates properly flushed, high-quality cannabis is not supported by anything. Ash color is driven mostly by how completely the material burned, which depends on moisture content and how densely it was packed. Damp flour burns incompletely and leaves dark ash. It is a moisture indicator dressed up as a quality indicator, and people have been using it to judge growers for years. None of this means every jar on a top shelf is a con, or that quality differences do not exist. They plainly do. A grower running excellent genetics in a well-controlled room with a patient dry and a long cure produces something genuinely better than a rushed commercial crop, and that difference is worth paying for. The problem is that the tier system does not reliably report that difference. It reports density, color, trim, and a lab number that the seller had a hand in producing, while the things that actually determine your experience go unmeasured and unlabeled. The word premium is a claim made by the person taking your money, using criteria they chose, verified by nobody. Once you know that, you stop shopping by shelf and start shopping by nose and by date, and you will find perfectly good flour 2 tiers below where you have been buying it.